Welcome to the Astrology of Terrible Things podcast with me, Carly Heath. Jessie Devine, our co-host, is out sick this week because her ascendant ruler entered her 8th house. So we have a guest co-host today, astrologer and tarot reader Tigris Blue. Welcome,
Hi.
Tigris.
Hello, hello. So honored to be here. Very excited.
And we were just joking beforehand that this is going to be a little bit of Mercury poisoning because you have Mercury in Gemini and I have Mercury in Virgo. So beware, there are going to be a lot of talking.
I'm going to try my best to hold back, but that is the nature of the mercurial peoples.
Well, we've discovered in this podcast that I can go on tangents and digressions into major details that aren't necessarily necessary for the plot, but it's entertaining to some. So I might keep on going with that. But you have Mercury in your 6th house, don't you? Which is the house of bad fortune. So you are especially skilled to talk about unfortunate events happening in people's lives.
Yeah, even though sometimes it feels like, oh God, should I? It comes out awkwardly sometimes, but like I have a natural like okayness, I guess, with it.
A natural okayness to talk about terrible things. And an interesting synchronicity when I reached out to you when Jessie was sick and I was like, I need a co-host for this week. You said I had just been watching a YouTube video on the most horrific events in history. What was that about?
Oh my gosh, it was so random. The other night, because of the eclipse, I have not been able to sleep. My energy has been just all over the place, insane. But oh gosh, I can't remember the exact name of the video, but it was just a list of historical events like pandemics, like the worst day in history. I'm sure you could type that into YouTube and it would come up.
Oh, and what draws you to horrible things? What fascinates you by it?
I think it's because it's definitely a peek into the psyche of the human and what we're capable of. Like, of course, we're capable of like these beautiful things, right? That's the opposite side of that. And so, like, what makes us so potentially horrible, and how can we prevent that? Of course.
In Scorpio season right now, we have so much in the ether of horribleness happening right now. We have like actual genocide happening right now, which is like
the epitome of terrible. Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty much as awful as you can be. And just for me, Scorpio season, I've noticed people being extremely aggressive. Have you
that
noticed
Mars energy, that Pluto Mars energy? Yes, I've noticed both sides of that coin, because when you come out of Libra season, you're coming out of literally the balance of from like the fruits and the sunshine and the happiness into then tipping into Scorpio season, the darkness and depths and the underworld. So I have noticed like that switching over. So I do want to say that there's still good in the world, but Scorpio season is a time of transformation. It's a time of transmutation. And so a lot of our demons are coming out. A lot of our inner or our personal horrors are coming to light a little bit more. And it's up to us and wherever we are in our journey to deal with those. But yeah, don't be surprised if you are encountering like some more heated energy from people or even yourself.
And Scorpio is your 11th house, and it's making a sextile, whole sign sextile to your ascendant and a trine to your sun. So, how do you personally find interactions with Scorpios for you?
I love them.
My co-host Jessie also loves Scorpios and is married to Scorpio.
I find them so like passionate, intense, all of the usual descriptors of a Scorpio, and I love it. I love how intelligent they are. I love that they're not afraid to go there. I love Aries too, because I find that they're similar. Once again, they're both ruled by Mars if you're looking into traditional astrology. But there's just something about scorpionic energy that's just so like it lures you in versus like the brash Aries that like goes after you. It's like, no, you come to me. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah, Scorpio is like sniper energy. It's like I'm gonna conserve my energy and plot my attack, and not necessarily even wait for the attack. I'm gonna wait until you come into my line of sight,
and then boom, you've been had.
um, so as Scorpio rules your 11th house, and that means Mars is transiting your 11th house, have you noticed aggression amongst your groups of friends?
I feel like it's subtle. It's like underneath the surface when it comes through, like we were just saying, like how it kind of lures you out. I Aggression I do feel like is strong, but I do notice a more assertive energy amongst my friends lately, that the energy to project themselves more, to be more seen or to be more
Mm.
known, more settled in themselves or their authenticity. I have been noticing that, which I think is a good thing. I think it's a good thing overall.
And you talked about your eclipse affecting you a lot, and that's in your 10th, fourth house axis. So that's like your
Mm-hmm.
public, how the public sees you versus like your hidden self, your past. And it also deals with, 10th house is mother, fourth house is father. So what eclipse themes have been coming up for you?
Definitely family. Family has been dealt with in good ways, and then some not so good ways. Definitely have had to deal with some personal things with a family member that weren't great, but
Mm.
were ultimately for the best. And then with my public image, like booming things happening there,
That's
even if it's small, it's all coming together in my career and public life in a way that has been a dream for me, but also intimidating at the same time because it felt like it all came crashing down
oh
at
wow,
once. Yeah,
that's
like onto
amazing.
my head. Yeah, in a good way. And I noticed I use really dramatic words too that don't sound great. Like going back to my Mercury in the sixth house, like it doesn't sound great, the words that I use to describe things happening to me or happening to other people sometimes, but I actually mean them in a positive way. Like when I say someone's chaotic, I'm like, that's just your energy. That's just how it is. It's great. But they're like, don't call me chaotic. That hurts my feelings. Oh my God, I don't want to be chaotic.
There's uh has that pushback from the words that you use been more amongst the older generation responding that way to your words, or the younger generation, or like people around our age, and
Yeah. Just everyone,
oh,
everyone. I've had people around my age be like, "What are you talking about?" Or
oh
like,
wow.
and then older people too that are like, "Girl, what are you talking about?"
I I've been noticing the Pluto in Leo and Pluto in Virgo generations,
Mm,
which are like, the boomers and the older Gen X's are
mhm.
very anti talking about negative things,
Yeah.
because the Pluto in Leo is like, I care about appearances and appearing like everything is okay. And so
Hmm.
when you bring up negative things, it's like, oh, why do you have to talk about negative things?
Gosh, yeah, my
Oh,
grandmother was definitely, she was also a Libra. So very like, everything is good, everything is fine, everything is great. I do say, I guess I will say that people closer to my generation are a little more open-minded. Like when I am explaining it, I'm like, oh, no, 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 it's just whatever. Then they're like, oh, okay, like that makes sense. But initially, I think it catches people off guard, some of the language that I use.
yeah, you're a Pluto in Scorpio and I know, Pluto in Libra, Pluto in Scorpio, Pluto in Sagittarius. This is the Pluto that is in the signs that are associated with the decay, the fall, the autumn season, the season where the leaves are falling off the trees, where everything
Mm-hmm.
is getting colder, where the
Death.
feeling of death is all around. And
Yeah.
so people who have these Plutos in these autumn signs are like, let's talk about the darkness and
Mm-hmm.
embrace it. Whereas the Pluto in Virgo and Pluto in Leo people are from the summertime, and they're like,
Yes.
wait a minute, we don't want to acknowledge that summer is about to end.
Yeah. I need my sunshine and my rainbows every day, all day. And that's just not reality, right? Like, I love talking about dichotomy and how, it all makes it up to be a whole. So when you do have these really good, beautiful things, you have to accept those shadowy aspects. I love talking about the shadow as well. I love reveling and rolling around in my shadow, or shadow dancing, even to like get more acquainted with that part of ourselves, because you can't just ignore it.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's like, it's, you can't have a podcast that's all about bad stuff, that's putting more bad energy into the world?
I would say that once again, it's ignoring a natural facet of life. There are going to be things that are not great that occur, that happen. And the more that you just not desensitize yourself to it, because these are still bad things, these are still bad people. You want to do something about those things, but I think it's just as detrimental to just be in the light all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
just not realistic.
Toxic positivity is definitely a thing. And
Yeah.
acknowledging, when I think when you make friends with the darkness a little bit, uh,
Yes.
you
That sounded a little too enthusiastic.
I know, I
Yes,
love it.
the darkness.
But make friends with the darkness. You understand that it's part of material reality that we cannot escape. You might be living your best life, you might be booked and busy, but you need to be aware that that time where you're at the peak and highlight of your career and everything is good and everyone loves you is going to come to an end. And
Yes.
I've
Which
seen that happen with so many people.
it makes you appreciate those times when it is good, when it
Exactly.
is light and fluffy. It makes the gratitude even stronger and the appreciation even stronger for those moments.
Yeah.
I love saying being friends with your shadow self, instead of like getting rid of it, like, or even just recognizing it but then like shunning it away. I'm like, be friends with it, because it's a part of you. You cannot separate yourself from the shadow.
Definitely. And the shadow shows up in a lot of really interesting ways in your life. And whenever you can acknowledge it, it's powerful, because the more you know about yourself, the more you know about why you're attracted to certain things, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the more things won't take you by surprise. You know?
Yes, yes, you can accept those things a lot easier. Those terrible moments a lot easier when you just are like, okay, this is life.
Okay, I'm excited. I had you do what Jesse started doing a few weeks ago on the podcast, which is
Yes.
share a chart with me that has had it's of a terrible event that
Mm-hmm.
has the dates and locations erased.
Mm-hmm.
And you have sent me a Libra rising chart. How interesting, because I'm a Libra rising. And so it's across the Libra and Aries axis, which is something that we have been talking about on the show for a few weeks now, which is the Libra Aries axis, because uh, we're having our eclipses across the Libra Aries axis. So I feel like
Mm-hmm.
everyone is thinking about that a whole lot, that axis point a whole lot. And then me and Jesse are exact opposites on the Libra Aries axis. So we've been talking about that a lot. And you have chosen a 0 degree, a chart with with Venus at 0 degrees Aries, which that
Yes.
0 degrees Aries
Woo!
point is something that we have been talking about on the podcast a lot, because
It's a
that's
kicker, right? It's a kicker.
it's
Jesse's is 0 degrees.
yeah, Jesse's is the 0 degrees Aries. Okay, so this is a night chart, so that means Venus is going to be the most positive thing in this chart, but she is in a Mars ruled sign, which
Mm-hmm.
is where she's in detriment. She doesn't really do well in Aries.
Mm-hmm.
That's Marilyn Monroe's Venus placement.
Ooh,
Kind of,
how deadly. Yeah.
so she's very, fierce, very like make Venus herself. But she was also,
Mm-hmm.
many people don't know this, she was also very messy.
Mm-hmm.
She was
Mm-hmm.
like
It
eating.
wasn't just her Gemini sun. No, no.
Yeah, yeah. She would eat crackers in bed and fall asleep with food, under her sheets and stuff. And of course, that was possibly a rumor uh, spread by exes who were bitter, and
Mm-hmm.
but there were rumors that she was messy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so we've got the Venus in the descendant. So that's the dealing with other people is the
Mm-hmm.
best part of this chart. And the worst part of this chart is the Mars in the sixth. No, sorry, Saturn in the sixth house, because this is a
Mm-hmm.
night chart. Saturn is going to be the worst, and which deals with misfortune, a a misfortune in Pisces So I'm feeling like, does this have to do with water? I'm don't answer that yet. I'm gonna work through it. I'm gonna think through it and figure it out. So a misfortune, usually Saturn and Pisces often has to do with drowning or potentially drowning, but because the Venus is in the part of the chart that deals with another person, I wonder if there was a rescue that happened at the last minute and it didn't turn out as bad. I'm noticing the midheaven is in Cancer with it, which is another water thing.
Water
And
energy is heavy
Jupiter.
in this for sure.
Yeah, there's there's kind of a trine happening with a grand trine happening with the midheaven, the Jupiter, and the Pisces planets. So it's almost like this didn't turn out as bad as it could have been because of those trines. And we do have the Neptune on the fourth house. So I'm going to say that this is definitely something to do with water. Because there's just so you can't avoid it. There's so much water. There's also
in a strange way. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also Pluto on is that the north node or the south node?
It looks like it's the north node.
Okay, Pluto on the north node in the second house, which deals with money, power.
I also think of like agriculture as well, or farming.
I was going to say animals. So animals, water, potential drowning.
And then when we think about Rahu or the North Node as well, that's kind of looking into your potential path, right? Like where you have the potential to go in this lifetime.
I almost want to say fish, just because it's Pisces, but maybe not. But there's a water, animals.
This one's tricky. This one's a weird one for sure.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Okay. Water, animals. The moon.
I was like, check out the moon.
The moon is applying to a square with the benefic Jupiter. So that means that also whenever you have the moon in an incident applying to a benefic, even if it's a square aspect, squares are the nature of Mars. So a square tends to be a difficult aspect, but when you're a moon applying to a benefic, it usually in any aspect, it usually means that there's something that's going to happen that's not as bad as it could have been.
Anything Jupiter is involved in, it's just like a little dash of hope, a little dash of hope.
That said, the Jupiter is retrograde and in a Mars ruled sign, being ruled by the sixth house. So that hero who's saving the day isn't as good as they could have been. The law is not fully on the side of what needs to happen. So I'm going to say, was this a woman who had some sort of dealing with either an animal, a coworker, or someone who worked for them? There was water involved in a misfortunate thing, and then it turned out to be not as bad as it could have been. Is that kind of like a correct direction I'm going?
Like hit bits and pieces, definitely involving water. This is a group phenomenon that happened. So we're looking at hundreds of people.
So let's look at that moon then. So because let's look at the sun, because the sun is the ruler of the 11th house, which is groups of people. And the sun is being provided for by Jupiter, which is a lot. Okay, what ended up happening? Tell the story.
So this is the 1994 UFO sightings in Michigan over Grand Rapids, like in that area. So water had like 300 people.
I know. I love that story. That's one of my favorite stories. Tell us the whole story. Yeah.
It's an interesting phenomenon, right? Because of course, like there's always been like speculation around alien sightings. And this is one of those unexplained events that how could you not at this point believe
Wasn't there a child that got abducted, or the child, they didn't know where the child was, and then the child showed up somewhere later?
I would have to look into that, but
Okay, I'm
like
gonna have to look in and jog my
yeah,
memory.
because that would be very spot on if that is true for what you said. Because we do have like some fifth house things happening here with the moon in the fifth house and the Mercury in the fifth house in Aquarius. And so anytime I do see Aquarius, stereotypical or not, there's something odd happening. There's something unorthodox happening and something with tech.
Aquarius also deals with the exterior, outside the boundaries.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so exiles, and actually in the event I'm going to tell you about, Aquarius figures quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
But it's the outsiders, you
Mm-hmm,
know?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think actually in that 11th degree, it's specifically everything and more. Like it is an event that occurred that opened people's eyes up to things beyond our world, things beyond what we know. And happening in the sun in Pisces too also is like otherworldly. And there's a bit of a darkness there. People were scared, people were terrified, and also fascinated by what was going on with these orbs of like yellows and greens and blues in the sky. And people saw them for several, like at least a couple hours, I think, that this was visible. I think it happened around like 9 p.m. to about like 10, 11 p.m. So, like, just a fascinating phenomenon.
Love
No
it.
deaths that I know of. So I was like, is this gruesome enough? Is this going to be?
It's different. And I'm just noticing the Neptune right on the on the descendant,
Mm-hmm.
right on the line of the descendant. It's home,
Mm-hmm.
the boundaries of home being erased,
Yeah.
and then the moon in Aquarius and Mercury in Aquarius, that
Mm-hmm.
communication with those on the outside of the realm between the material world and the realm that we don't see.
Yeah. I also want to say that 0 degrees in Venus, another thing that you've just never
Uh-huh.
seen before.
The 0 degree Aries
Yeah.
is such a powerful point.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I've just noticed so many people who have 0 degrees Aries can see the realm beyond.
Yes.
Like I said in the other podcast, Harry Houdini, Nostradamus,
Mm-hmm.
that's the beginning point. That's the beginning point.
Shooting through the canals, like coming for you.
It's it's the threshold between the imaginary realm and the material realm. Uh,
Yeah.
have you ever had an alien encounter?
I've had a lot of different encounters, as you as you know, like via how we met through
Yeah.
the New Blood Universe crew. Um, so I've had a lot of encounters that like I would maybe just easily chalk up to some sort of ghost phenomenon, something that is still like human, maybe. Um, but being a part of that crew has also opened my eyes like, okay, well, maybe there is like something otherworldly happening here. There's maybe something alien that I've been encountering as well. Um, there's a lot out there, folks.
What's been your favorite paranormal encounter of your life?
Probably in one of my old apartments. I was just hanging out with a friend. We were doing our usual thing, grooving in the living room. Nothing. I think this may have even occurred during the day, which also just like blows, like not blows my
Nice.
mind, but makes it even more, interesting. Where I had my back turned towards my kitchen. It was like a little galley kitchen, like a hallway, basically. And my friend was facing the kitchen, and we were dancing, listening to some music, having a good time. And she texts me later on in the day, and she's like, hey, I didn't want to freak you out. I didn't want to say anything, which is funny because it's me. But she's like, I saw the upper half of a woman just float by while you were dancing.
I
And I
love it.
just, yeah, yeah. I was like, and I knew exactly who it was. I mean, I didn't know, but there was a presence in that apartment since day one. We called her Elaine, which was actually my friend's middle name.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so I'm glad that she actually got to see her. We said
Oh,
goodbye to her when I left that apartment. We said goodbye to her and the light flickered. I was like,
oh, I love that.
yeah,
Oh, so much. Yeah,
shout out Elaine.
I had a roommate. that actually passed away in my old apartment. She had been suffering from cancer for a long time, and she ended up passing away. And that I had actually moved from the apartment right before she passed away. And I went back a few years later to visit with the people who lived in the apartment now, and they had never known her. They had never known me. I was just actually there to pick up a cat. And I asked them, hey, have you guys noticed any paranormal things in your apartment? And they're like, yes, actually. And I said, in the far back bedroom? And they're like, yes. And I was like, my roommate passed away there.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's what's going on.
Yeah. What did they say? How did they feel?
They were very shocked, and I think they were at a little bit too shocked to verbalize at that moment. So, and I was in a hurry, and so I just left them with some information
Thanks for
that was
the
probably
cat.
extremely
Bye.
upsetting. Yeah.
Oh no. And in typical mercurial fashion, here you go.
Yeah. Here's the information you did not ask for, and now I'm gonna leave. Bye bye.
Goodbye.
Have fun. Have fun with your ghost friend. Leave out treats for her.
God, it's just that confirmation of like, because they're probably sitting there the whole time, like, we're insane, we're crazy, that's nothing going on there. And then just to have that confirmation of no, oh no, you saw what you saw, just is, I'm sure, was definitely surprising.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love alien stories. It makes me so happy. And I love seeing that 0 degrees Aries show up.
Me too. I saw about it. And
so
I like
much.
freaked out. I love any like critical degrees. So like 29 degrees, I get really excited about as well. And it's just such a like potent energy when you see those numbers.
I'll continue talking about what I talked about in the other podcast episode a few podcasts ago, where I was Jesse and I were revealing we're equinox babies. We're both 0 degrees folks, and I noticed that whenever there's an equinox, I encounter people from the southern hemisphere, and also just big changes happen in my life. And I was telling the story about meeting Doppelcarly, who was at the same event that I was in. I came across her video. She was standing right next to me. Her name was Carly. We're both in the same fandom. We were both at the same event. We're both actively involved in this activist thing that we are both doing. I met her, and I've been hanging out with her a lot more lately. She confirmed she is from the southern hemisphere. She's from Chile. I looked up her chart. We don't have her exact birth time because she had to escape Chile during the coup and lost all the birth records and stuff.
Understandable.
But her nodes are at 0 degrees Capricorn and Cancer.
Oh, that's so hard.
0 degrees of cardinal signs.
Yes.
So, I'm 0 degrees Libra, Aries, 0 degrees Cancer, and Capricorn are exactly square to my degrees. Okay. So Carly is also queer like I am, also vegetarian, and also has an orange cat.
Oh my God. Do you all look like physically similar in any way?
Dark hair, not, I don't know, not really. I don't know if we don't really look alike. She's shorter. Okay. But also interestingly, on the day that I had first reached out to her, it also happened to be the day of the equinox, and I had been the first time what I had been surrounded by a bunch of Australians, and then also I encountered a famous person that same day from Chile. And I then, on the day where I met Doppelcarly in person for the first time, I also met that same randomly famous person from Chile on the same day. I did not.
My mouth is open. Sorry, people can't see me just like agape right now.
So it was really interesting. Every time I encounter Carly from Chile, I encounter this other famous, not that she's famous, but I encounter this famous first person from Chile. Anyway, the parallels, the synchronicities are really interesting.
So interesting.
I did not do the astrology of that, other than the equinox was the first time I reached out to her.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
The
And
the
you're still alive after meeting your doppelganger.
I know. I know. Which actually brings up the thing I'm going to talk about, the astrology of the terrible thing I'm going to talk about. Mine, I made uh, difficult choices for myself in that, like, I decided to choose something extremely complicated that's multiple charts that takes place over a long period of time. But the signature in this chart, in this thing that happened really over the course of a year, is a Saturn Neptune conjunction. So,
Ooh.
as someone, let's talk about those two planets. As someone you who has
Mhm.
a Saturn ascendant
Oh
and
boy.
Neptune in a Saturn ruled sign,
Yes.
first, what keywords come into your head when you think of Saturn?
Difficult. Time, the Lord of
Time.
Time.
It's a good.
I also think of father. I love to make the comparison of Jupiter being like fun dad and then Saturn being like hardcore father. He is here to teach you lessons, very karmic.
Yes. And then what keywords come to your mind when when you think of Neptune?
I think of stardust and fantasy, of things that are kind of blown out. It's a higher octave of Venus, so it's like it's alien like. It's kind of crazy, but also like mesmerizing.
What can be the negative things associated with Neptune?
Delusion, confusion, um, sinking so deeply into something, like being obsessed with things also comes to mind with Neptune.
So if we were to have an event where a Saturn Neptune conjunction plays a huge role in this event, what sort of keywords might describe that event?
Oh my God. In the grand scheme of things, I think it's meant to open people's eyes up to something that has not been seen before, maybe widely misunderstood, but also attractive maybe to people, or something that does attract people. Um, but it once you get close, it makes you end up learning like a huge lesson that you're meant to learn over and over and over again. What is this?
Okay, there's also a signature in this chart that
Okay.
is Sun Pluto conjunction.
Oh gosh, another intense, once again, intense combination.
What keywords come up with when you think of Pluto?
Okay, underworld for sure. Definitely the depths of the darkness. Like even deeper than darkness, there's Pluto and cold.
Cold. Cold also
Unfeeling.
is associated with Saturn too, right?
Yes, yes, the further you get away. Yeah. All those planets.
And what's associated with the sun?
Oh, abundance, happiness, bright. I love when I wrote, because I'm a night chart, I'm like, oh, the sun. Uh, but abundance, happiness. I also associate it with like freedom, authenticity, the self as well. Um, so when you combine that with Pluto, wow, you're getting a powerful figure, perhaps, that while they have great power, may not do the best things with it, or they're only out to gain things for their own ego.
I'll give you the final clue. Uh, Mercury retrograde plays a role in this as well.
Oh my goodness. You're just whammy after whammy. I think most people probably know what goes with Mercury retrograde. I mean, it's honestly just a little blip to me. It's just annoying, if anything. It's meant to reassess, it's meant to rethink.
Is it a good idea to
Um,
start something when Mercury is retrograde?
not at all.
No.
Not at all. So beginning anything during that time, just don't even think about it.
So I'm going to tell you about the Donner Party today.
Oh my God.
How much do you know about the story of the Donner Party?
I feel like I've heard this before, but like, please tell me everything and associating, because I've never thought of it in this context, and just having that. Oh my gosh.
The big thing to know is this is going to be an unpopular opinion because we get fed a lot of pro-colonial propaganda in school in the United States. And so many people, when they first hear me say this, are going to be like, you can't say that. But the people involved in the Donner Party were not good people.
Yeah.
Let's just get out there. People think, oh no, but they were families just looking for a better life. These people, in order to get a wagon train and go all the way across the country, you have to be extremely wealthy to get all those oxen together, to get the hired hands together. These were rich people who already had money and were wanting to get more money by going to Sutter's Fort, which was, I'm summarizing so much. The Donner Party is going from Springfield, Illinois, and here's a little Saturn Neptune thing that kind of start off the trip. There was a lot of disease in the East and in the Midwest and Illinois. What were they dealing with? Cholera. They were dealing with a lot. So Neptune is often associated with disease. Saturn is associated with disease. So they were also kind of escaping the disease there and trying to go to a land where there was no disease. But let's face it, the big thing is these were rich people who wanted to get more rich by getting so-called free land, which was already belonged to people already. And this guy, Sutter, who had Sutter's Fort, and this is just something that people who don't live in the United States need to know, is that there's all these towns around the United States that are called something something fort. And the reason why is because these towns were set up in order to vanquish Native Americans and the indigenous populations. And because Americans are kind of okay with that, we just keep the name fort for a lot of towns. And if we were to maybe look at ourselves a little bit more and question ourselves, we would be like, maybe we should change the name of these towns that are named after these established.
Maybe honor the people that were hurt.
Yeah, maybe. You know,
just a start, just a thought.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't keep cities being named after institutions that were established to kill people. Basically.
Yeah.
So the guy Sutter, who established this fort, basically established this like mini empire north of Sacramento, where he essentially enslaved a lot of indigenous people, forced them to convert to Catholicism, and took their names from them and renamed them with Catholic names. And he would, for these settlers who were coming from across the country, he would, give them some Native Americans, like, here, have these. And so when things got really bad with the Donner Party and they were starving, they got trapped in the mountains and they were starving, the Native Americans who had been given to them were like, oh shit, they're going to kill us and eat us. We better escape these white people. And they did. And they ran off, but they turned out to be right, because yes, the white people did kill them. And so all that, anyone who's listening who's like, oh, but I thought the Donner Party, they were victims. These are not good people. So we need to start from a situation that's there. And I do
another Christopher Columbus.
Yeah. I need to, people will be like, but there's so many children that died. And I'm like, that's also why these are not good people, because they subjected their children to this absolutely horrible experience because they simply wanted to make more money. If they really cared about their children, they would, stay where they are, not go 2,000 miles across the continent with no doctors, no nothing,
right?
Put themselves at risk. Because even before they got to Truckee, even before they got to California and they got trapped in the mountains and starved to death, a a lot of people died along the journey because 2,000 miles takes a lot of time. So back to the beginning. So this is essentially the overview of the Donner Party. Is they traveled a long ways. They got trapped in the mountains in California by the snow. The reason they got trapped is because this dude called Hastings came along midway through and was like, hey, you guys, take this shortcut. Now, Hastings had never taken the shortcut before. He was just a fan of the idea of the shortcut. And so
Neptune.
Yeah, Donner was like, hey, let's take the shortcut. And everyone else who was in the party was like, you know what, maybe let's not take the shortcut. This route here has been established. Let's stay on the route. But the Donner Party, which included the Reed Party, Reed was also the guy named Reed. What was his name? George James something. I have it in my notes here. He was not a good guy either. He actually had major road rage along the 2,000-mile journey and killed a man. And
oh my God.
Luckily the people were like, F you, Reed. We're going to send you out into the wilderness. You can't be friends
with
the
wolves. You go.
And so he's like, hey, I'll check up with you. But he actually ended up kind of surviving because he killed someone and got kicked out of the wagon train. So that is a whole thing. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked.
But it's just so much, so much death, which like Saturn, I think too, sometimes rules death.
Yeah. So I'm getting sidetracked. The main story is, I got a lot of this from a journalist named Carly Stevens, Carly, who wrote an article called Endless Winter for KQED. And I also got kind of the overview from the My Favorite Murder podcast on our part. And historians have described this episode as one of the most fascinating tragedies in California history and the entire record of the American westward migration. In 1846, the California to which the Donner Party was journeying wasn't actually part of the United States. It was still Mexican territory called Alta California, and it wouldn't officially be part of the US for another 4 years. California was home to 300,000 indigenous people. And this is the era of manifest destiny. President James Polk had propagated the idea that it is our divine right to build a country coast to coast after the Louisiana Purchase. Well, the divine rights of white people. What's going on here.
Power.
Yep. The fact that this land was home to indigenous people wasn't something that the people like the Donner Party really seemed to care about. They were escaping cholera and malaria in the Midwest. And again, because they were rich, they were able to hire tons of people to help with their westward migration. And they were headed to this fort, Sutter's Fort, which was started by a Swiss colonizer named John Sutter. And this is a miniature empire. And a miniature empire for white people. And it would kind of evoked everything that these Midwestern settler colonialists wanted, which was the California sun. So there you have that.
The land of abundance and sunshine, happiness.
And he enticed the local Native Americans to work and pay for his fort by essentially forcing them into a complete state of slavery. And he burned down their roundhouses, which were their spiritual, like almost like their churches, and as a way of motivating them to work harder. So this is who the Donner Party is going to meet up with. Who they think is the greatest guy. This John Sutter.
That guy. Yeah,
that guy. Wow. Anyway, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Fuck John Sutter. And there's still a Sutter's Fort in California. And I think we should rename it to something
for sure.
Probably the original names of the 2 Native Americans who were killed by the Donner Party.
If you can find records of that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of that stuff is destroyed.
April 15th, 1846, the journey begins in Springfield, Illinois. George Donner, his brother Jacob, and then James Reed, James, who is going to get road rage along the trip and eventually shoot and kill someone, and then he's going to get kicked out of the wagon train. A bunch of servants and their kids, and the trip is there. It's 2,000 miles, and they have to time this right, because if they're too slow reaching the Sierra Nevadas, it will be snowing by then, and then they'll be trapped. So the chart of the beginning of their trip, I'll see if I
was
can.
like, where does the cold come in?
The cold is going to come in later, but this, I think, is a good chart to show us what not to do in life. And interestingly, there's a part where they are going to like freeze to death and things are going to be really, really bad. And it's like a very Venus dominated chart. And I feel like Venus is always the one who restores balance to the universe in many ways. And I feel like if you're having a bad time while Venus is dominant in the chart, that probably means that you're a bad person.
Hint, hint.
Anyway, but this is the chart of the beginning of their journey. And as you can see, there's a lot of signifiers of things that you should be aware of if you're beginning a long 2,000-mile journey and you see any of these things in your chart that lets you know that this is probably not going to turn out well for you. One, the the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is getting real close. Eventually, both Saturn and Neptune are going to go retrograde and stay together for a long time. So this Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to go on for over a year. And by the time we get to, so April 15th, by the time we get to March 1847, the Donner family will be dead. And so if you're starting a journey where Saturn and Neptune are going to be pretty much really close together the whole time, things are not going to go well for you. You're going to make a lot of bad decisions. Also, Saturn in an air sign is very cold. And Neptune is often associated with disease and the dissolving of boundaries. And it's interesting that the thing that makes the Donner Party so famous is cannibalism. In their last stages, they ate people. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the idea of that dissolving of boundaries. What you're going to be willing to do for food. Saturn is also associated with starvation because Saturn is restriction, right? So they began their journey when the moon was opposite Mars. Not a good moon placement. You always want to begin something when the moon is applying to a benefic,
and I feel like this is a small part of it, just Mars and Gemini in general is kind of
Gemini is a sign that is ruled by Mercury. So what's Mercury doing? Oh, Mercury is retrograde.
Yeah.
No, that's not gonna work out really good. And then even when Mercury eventually goes direct, it's gonna hit this. Is this the South Node?
Yeah.
It's a South Node.
In Taurus.
Yeah, and South Node in Taurus. Taurus is
so like all your resources, all your food. Yes, it's depleted. It's not going great, to say the least.
Yeah, and we have the Sun conjunct Pluto. Everything's gonna be great. Oh, but there's that death signature there.
Right, like everything's fine, like that one meme of the dog and the house on fire. Yeah, everything's fine. No, it is not. Look around you.
So 500 wagons headed west from Independence. A lot of families. We keep on saying the Donner Party, but there were a lot of families, and they started out the journey called the Boggs Party. They'll change their name throughout this thing a whole lot. But there's a lot of different families involved, and and the bogs and the climbing people, they're like, we're gonna just go the standard route. And it was the Reeds and the Donners who were like, we're gonna take the shortcut this random dude that we met told us about.
Does that make sense? Because that makes total sense.
And that makes me think so much about the shiny sun Leo
Yeah.
people who are like,
Yeah.
have, and it's also a signature that's coming up for us soon, which is Mercury and Sagittarius.
Yes.
Whereas Mercury and Sagittarius this shows up at the chart at the very end of their journey, but we'll in the collective be dealing with this when Mercury's like, I have this great idea.
But maybe not thinking that idea thoroughly, like thinking it through enough, or, just being so enthusiastic that you can get everyone on board. Of course, there's like this attraction or like this attractive passion that comes through with Sagittarius, or specifically with Mercury and Sagittarius, but it's not always the best idea, but don't you dare disagree.
Yeah, I think Mercury in a Jupiter ruled sign can be described as the extremely endearing and charming incompetent person.
Yes. It's like, oh honey, what do you mean? So adventurous as well, like going
adventurous, charming, endearing. Oh, we love you, but you are incompetent.
Yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about. Great for ideas, horrible for execution.
Yeah. So June 27th, what was this chart? I'm going to try to summarize this because I took way too many notes in my research. But June 27th is when they meet with Lansford Hastings. So that's the first time they meet Hastings, who's going to tell them, take the shortcut. That again, Hastings has never been on the shortcut before.
Has no idea.
Convince them that the shortcut is a good idea. Now, at this point, Saturn and Neptune are retrograde. Saturn had escaped Neptune a little bit, but it's still in the 3-degree orb. So there's still a very strong Saturn Neptune vibe. And we have Mars at the anaretic degree of Cancer. And we have, it's interesting. We have at this point Jupiter in Gemini, and Jupiter in Gemini is where Jupiter's in its detriment. So they started out the journey with Jupiter in Taurus. So things were seeming okay. But now when Jupiter has dipped into Gemini, that's when they're going to make some really bad decisions. And with Jupiter usually ruling long distance travel, that means fortune on your long distance travel is not on your side.
No.
And
very slim to none.
Yeah. And Mercury is in Cancer. So that means whatever the moon is doing, people are making their decisions based on these fleeting emotions. Oh, right now the vibe is good. I'm going to do this. I like this guy's vibe. Let's go with it.
That's all this was. Like, he seems cool. Oh my God.
So eventually on July 20th, that's when they officially take that left-hand road to Fort Bridger, which is the first, like, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to follow Hastings and go to this cutoff. And eventually this little cutoff, which is supposed to save them a couple of days, it adds 30 days to their journey.
That unexpected. Yeah. I'm looking at the.
So this is the day that they actually make that decision to go and follow Hastings.
Yeah, we're still the sun in Cancer.
And at this point, Saturn and Neptune are getting closer.
Yeah. Aquarius, that unpredictability, the flip-floppiness, the let's just go, let's just do it.
And Aquarius is, like we talked about, associated with the wilderness. It's associated with being on the outside things,
Mm-hmm.
of
But
being
having that Saturn retrograde. Ugh.
unable to, yeah, unable to come back home. And that's something that's a signature you'll see once they get to the Sierra Nevadas. They're trapped in the mountains. They try to escape multiple times and go to civilization, to security, but they keep having to come back to their
Wow.
place of exile. They can't.
It's like nothing, yeah, nothing that they do seems like they can escape this certain ending. Because, like we were talking about with that 0 degrees, the 29th degree is the opposite of that. That is endings. That is like the punctuation mark on a sentence. That is end, period. So, and Saturn too is not looking good.
And check this out, Mercury is about to apply to an opposition with Saturn. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like we had Mercury opposite Saturn on that election that we had in 2020 when we didn't get the election results for like a
Right
really
on time. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and so not only so Mercury is going to first hit this opposition to Neptune, and then it's going to hit this opposition to Saturn. So it's like the opposition to Neptune is like, I don't know what the right thing to do is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go based on vibes.
Instinct, quote unquote.
Yeah. And interesting that Mars is in Leo. Leo is associated with the gut. I'm going to follow
Yeah.
my heart, you know?
Yeah, my heart, my gut instinct. Cancer gives me that vibe too. It's just kind of a whole mess, honestly. This chart is a mess. Sorry if anyone has a chart similar to this.
Well, something I've noticed is that if you have a bad chart, it can show up in your life in a really positive way. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking this actor I really like, detriment, Mercury in a Jupiter ruled sign. And he's charming because he plays characters that are charming and incompetent. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the comedy right there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is, just people going off their gut and making really bad decisions. And I would not make a new change in course if Mercury is about to oppose Saturn, because that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be time delays that
Mm-hmm.
as it doesn't get much more obvious than that delays. So on the day
Exactly.
that they decide to take this cutoff, Mercury is applying to the opposition with Neptune, and then will quickly oppose Saturn. So that this is going to go downhill really fast. And then we had July 31st, James Reed, who I think hasn't been exiled at this point.
Love your note for
He, he's working. I know my notes are chaotic. He's gone ahead. So Hastings has gone way ahead. They're following Hastings because they're slower because they have a whole wagon train, whereas Hastings, I think, is moving faster. Maybe he's on horseback. I don't know. But James Reed is also going ahead and writes Hastings cutoff is said to be saving 350 to 400 miles and is a better route. The rest of the Californias went the long route because they were afraid of the Hastings cutoff. At the fort, the travelers take on new members. Now they have 74 people. And okay, the 31st, that's when they officially head on the route. And at that point, the moon is in Scorpio. So you just never want to make new changes.
Do anything in the death sign of Scorpio.
Yeah, when the moon is in Scorpio, and then when the moon gets to the end degrees of Scorpio, it's going to make a square to Saturn. And this happened a lot in 2021 when Saturn was in Aquarius. And I feel like every time that moon hit Scorpio, there was something new and terrible that happened every time it hit that square to Saturn.
Just a constant like snake shedding its skin is what I think of with moon and Scorpio.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, bad moon in Scorpio at that point. August 30th. what's happened August 30th. Okay, August 30th is Redland Springs, their last source of water before they cross the desert. So they collect all of their water and their grass before they cross the desert, and that's August 30th. And the moon is opposite Jupiter, and Mercury is retrograde. That retrograde Mercury is providing for that Jupiter. So, which is already at its detriment because it's not a Mercury ruled sign, but now Mercury retrograde. On the third day, they run out of water on their crossing of the desert. How very, and look how close the Saturn Neptune conjunction is. The Saturn Neptune conjunction is like they're
on like top of each other.
They're on top of each other.
Yeah. Like just so divinely unfortunate.
And they are, oh my God. And here's the thing. They are opposite that retrograde Mercury. So that retrograde Mercury is going to hit the opposition to the Saturn Neptune conjunction again as it goes backwards. So they made
hit after hit.
Yeah, hit after hit. They made this decision while the first round of Mercury was hitting the opposition to Saturn and Neptune. And then when Mercury went retrograde, it's hitting the opposition to Saturn and Neptune again. It's gonna hit that opposition to Saturn and Neptune 3 times because that's how Mercury retrograde works.
Yep.
So this is not gonna end well for them.
Like they had no astrologer on their team, clearly, to tell them, to warn them that none of this is a good idea. None of it.
And even if you were to say like, oh, well, they didn't know about the outer planets back then, or, but they knew about Saturn.
Yeah. So, and you need to know that one at least, like you knew. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Oh, and check out the nodes are at the 0 degrees of Scorpio and Taurus.
Oh my goodness. So it's like a rebirth, but it's after so much death.
The nodes are about to shift into Libra and Aries.
Yeah.
So things are about to get they've lost their food supply because that's the South Node in Taurus, right? Losing your food and your resources.
Yeah.
When the nodes go into Libra and Aries, it's gonna be war.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Between peace and war.
So on October 11th, the Paiute Indians kill and steal a bunch of ox. They kill and steal over 100 ox from the Donner Party. And I'm like, good on them.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you're a white person
doing horrible things.
Doing horrible things and taking stuff from people who already live there. So
also, I feel like you're probably going to say this a lot on this podcast, but the laughter that you all may hear as the audience is not to be like, oh, this is funny. Like, it's like a divine comedy and life is a divine comedy. It's so tragic that you have to laugh, like if nothing else, because it's so just horrible what is happening here, what happens in general. I think about that a lot with Sagittarius in particular, Gemini Sagittarius axis, where it's like you have to laugh to keep from crying. You have to be able to see the humor or the silver lining in things. That can be a good thing with Sagittarius placements. But it's just so terrible.
I feel like laughter also happens when a realization is made. It's like, when you understand something.
Exactly. When you that's funny, quote, quote, how this all comes to be, how this all has happened.
Yeah, but definitely. So they are 2 men. They're in a bad situation. So the Donner Party themselves are in a bad situation. 4 wagons broke. They lost 38 cows. They lost over 100 ox. 2 men go ahead to Sutter's Fort, which is north of Sacramento, to get provisions and bring them back. And the men eventually come back with 7 mules loaded with provisions. And this is when Sutter gives them two Native Americans, Louis and Salvador, who that's not their real names. They were forcibly converted to Catholicism, and that was the names that they were given. Um, and they're from historyexp.org. There's a nice little backstory on Louis and Salvador. Basically, they knew that eventually in mid-December, the Donner Party would probably kill them and eat them because everyone was starving. And so they decided to try and escape the Donner Party on their own. And let's see, but eventually they were shot and killed. And this guy, Joseph King, researched the early records and believed that, and unfortunately I cannot pronounce these names, but believe that their names originally were Ima, I think the name is, who would have been around 19.
Oh my goodness.
And that was probably Lewis. And then Quian was Salvador. That was his original name. Yeah. And he would have been about 28, which is a Saturn return. So
young.
Yeah, so young. But interesting, 19 is the 8th house year, which is associated with death. And then 28 is your Saturn return, which is often a time when a lot of people die because Saturn can be so hard if you're a night chart Saturn. But those are just some guesses, but at least we get a little bit of background, which are on two people who were lost to history. And if I had it my way, we would
rename it after them.
Rename Sutter's Fort after them. Yeah. Because they are the real heroes in this. On October 20th, a group of 81 adults and children were attacked by a snowstorm in the mountains. And it didn't stop for days. And this is October 20th. This is basically the day everything is just going to go downhill from there. We got the moon.
Everything's in Scorpio.
We've got the South Node in Scorpio, the North Node in Scorpio at this point. We got Mercury in Scorpio. We got Saturn and Neptune still hanging out real close together. We got Mars and Venus conjunct, and we got Venus opposing Uranus. Now, interestingly, though, the master of the nativity and the most dominant planet is Venus in this chart. So it kind of seems like Venus is rectifying the horror that the Donner Party wrought as they are making their way. This is Venus's chance to kind of get back at these colonizers a little bit and detain them in a snowstorm.
That's very like poetic in a way with Libra, with the placement being in Libra, being rectified.
Running out of batteries. Okay, December 16th is at this point, people are eating shoelaces and animal bones. They're trapped in the mountain. The 15 strongest people make snowshoes and try to get to Sutter's Fort, which is a 6-day walk away. This is the chart of that forlorn hope excavation expedition, their last chance to try and escape. And we have Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, which we talked a lot about earlier, which is not a good time. Not a good time. People not making good decisions. Interestingly, we have a Venus Cazimi also in Sagittarius at that point.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And check out Pluto on the North Node on Rahu there, and look at that Saturn Neptune conjunction.
Wow.
So close. And they're direct at this point.
Yeah.
This is the middle of December, and it's still going to be 4 more months in the mountains for these people. And 4 more months until the last of the Donners finally die.
Yeah.
Christmas Day, a blizzard hits. We got Mercury direct at that point, and we have Moon conjunct Uranus, and Mars. Oh, there we go. Mars squaring Neptune and Saturn.
Oh my goodness.
So that's a really good signature for a blizzard. Mars
Yeah.
squaring Neptune and Saturn.
Yeah.
At this point, they're resorting to cannibalism because 8 people on their forlorn hope journey die. And so they cut up the people and they package their meat and they label
like
the packaging so that no one in the party ends up eating their relative.
oh my God. Oh gosh, it's just so dark and disturbing, which like that Aquarius, I feel like Aquarius and Scorpio energy could like conjure is that. Like cannibalism is ugh.
Venus in a Saturn ruled sign feels that way. Like it's often like I just whatever it takes to survive,
to have some sort of nourishment, I guess. Ugh. Yikes.
So instead of taking 6 days to get to Sutter's Fort, it takes 33 days.
God.
Could you imagine walking in the snow for 33 days?
Oh my God. You couldn't. You wouldn't. You couldn't.
Yeah. So Illinois is not looking that bad, is it?
Right.
You thought sunny California was going to be all that. And you're walking in the snow for 33 days. Rescue.
Karma.
And Sutter's Fort sends a rescue party, but it takes 18 days for the rescue party to get there. That's how long things took. So eventually on January 17th, the rescuers arrive. A ghastly, gaunt woman emerges from the snow because the snow has gotten so tall that it just covers the roof of their little cabins that they built for themselves. And she's like, are you men from California or are you from hell? Like, she has no flesh on her.
Her brain is just like mush at this point, probably.
Yeah. They used animal hides to cover their roofs, and they'd been eating the animal hides off of the roof because that's all they had, and just eating dried skin. They called this camp the Starved Camp. And by mid-February, John Sutter would give $3 a day to anyone who would keep going out to the rescue party to help. The first relief party had 23 members. 2 died. These people who go out to rescue them are dying too.
Right. It's totally a suicide mission.
Yeah. March 12th, the third relief party comes, and there are 4 survivors left, leaving. The 4 survivors left the camp to go to Sutter's Fort, leaving behind George and his wife because they were too weak, and they end up dying towards the end of the month. So in the middle of March. So think, less than a year ago, they were like, we're going to have a better life in California. And then just almost a year later, they're starving to death in the snow.
Yeah.
And this is March 12th. By this point, this is kind of getting to the end of the story because Neptune and Saturn are now in different signs. They're far apart at this point. Venus is in Mars's sign in Aries. And
so spring begins, the birth begins.
Spring is about to begin. It's Pisces season at this point.
Yeah.
And by April 17th, it's all over with. The final relief party arrives. Louis Kesselberg is the only person that's still alive in the camp, and he's surrounded by half-eaten corpses. And so this
horrifying. Absolutely horrifying.
Or you thought you'd be in this podcast and I would just like I end up telling the most horrifying story yet.
No, and it's like, once again, you have to be comfortable with these kinds of conversations. How else are we ever going to learn to not do something as stupid and horrific as this? But again,
what's fascinating is the story kind of ends where it begins. April 17th, And we have the sun conjunct Pluto again. So this is a whole sun Pluto cycle. This is this Donner Party story. And now that's the sun has come back around to see Pluto. We're in a completely different place than they thought that they were going to be in last year. Makes me think like pay attention to whatever you're starting when the sun is conjunct Pluto, and then track it to a year later
and see where you end up.
See where you end up. Because this definitely did not start where it needed to be. Interestingly, as I was looking at this, I was like 1847. Why do I know that? 1847 is the year that the vegetarian movement started.
Okay, because I kept saying birth. I'm like, there's something that comes after this. There's something new that comes from like after the situation, whether it's directly involved or not. There's something new that happens after such a great transformation like that.
But isn't it interesting, like this year that's like this all about starvation and
exactly
resorting to eating the most horrible thing, and then
the horrible meats. And then you're like, you know what? Let's just not eat meat. How about that? Let's do things that are good for us. Let's not harm people or animals. Yeah.
So this is the chart. I just decided to pull it up of the official birth of the vegetarian movement, which is September 29th, 1847, which was the day that the Vegetarian Society started. And you'll notice that there's all of the big old stellium in Libra.
Yeah, everything's in the harmonious Libra.
I have a stellium in Libra. So I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting that I'm a vegetarian. And my chart looks a lot like the vegetarian birth chart.
That's so funny.
So that's kind of funny. And then Mars Mars retrograde in Taurus is kind of interesting too. Exalted Jupiter and in Cancer.
So much padding, so much abundance with a Jupiter in Cancer. And then even with retrograde, Mars and retrograde in Taurus, we're taking it very, very slow. We're digesting and we're doing our best to thoroughly, in this case, I guess, eat the things that are good for us and do other things that are good for us.
And interestingly, it's a Saturn in Pisces chart. So the vegetarian movement that started in Europe in 1847 is having its Saturn return right now, or like once Saturn goes direct and starts arriving near that 7-degree point again.
Yeah.
But it's a full sign Saturn return.
Yeah.
So I wonder if, you know, there's a little bit of, there's a lot happening in the food supply right now.
We're having a lot of talk about agriculture and farming and where food supply is heading with the population.
Yeah.
I think I read something recently about there being an incentive for farmers to produce more, or I can't remember exactly what it was. But yes, lots of talk about food and what the future looks like within that realm.
Yeah. Interestingly, too, the Saturn in Pisces often is associated with death and the sea. And one of the early founders of the vegetarian movement, the reason he became vegetarian was, this is a little known fact about history, but in the 1700s and early 1800s, when this fellow was growing up, shipwrecks were extremely common. And also this was still the slave trade. And there would be tons of bodies that would constantly wash up on shore on the beach. And you would just walk down the beach and see human body parts just lining the ocean. And when you would go to the fish market and the fishermen would share their hauls, they would dump out their nets, and with all the fish would be arms and legs.
Oh my God.
Because so many human bodies in the ocean. Yeah. And so what made this one of the early founders vegetarian was just the disgust he felt on seeing all these human body parts mixed in with these fish that people were eating.
Could you imagine the smell?
Smell.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it just
horrendous.
I always try to find a way to end on a positive note because we are just like traumatized.
After all of that.
Yeah, I just went through the most horrific thing, and then I'm talking about body parts washing up on the beach.
Right.
And so what's going on in your life, Tigris?
Well, I just started writing an astrology column actually with Yay! Yes, I'm so excited about it with Queer Kentucky. So it's called Stargazing. You can find it every month on the website. I am also a part of the New Blood Universe team, and we're gearing up for our shows that are coming out soon.
I can't wait.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited that you were involved. I'm so excited to meet you through them. So yes, so those are kind of the main things that I got going on. So yeah, thank you once again for having me on the podcast. This was fascinating. I of course am into astrology and have done like things like this here and there, but to go into depth like this and to kind of be like fun with it and to guess, you know, what through the transits and through the planets and positions, what's going on, because it all makes sense. It all has a way of helping us understand ourselves in the world, right? That's why we do it.
And you gave me a really good tarot and astrology reading. Are you still doing readings for people?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm so great at promoting. Yeah.
I'm going to make sure you promote yourself. Where can people find you if they want to get a tarot astrology reading?
If you would like to get a reading from me, you can go ahead and either email me at tarotbytigris@gmail.com, or you can message me on Instagram, which is Tigres, TIGRESSE.blue, BLEU, very French. And yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome. It was so fun. Would you like to come back sometime? Because this is so fun, like having.
Oh, yes.
Here.
Oh, yes. Maybe do the other one that I was thinking about, which is a little more gruesome than my alien encounter.
I loved it. I loved it so much. Cool. Oh, well, thank you so much again. And you guys be sure to give us a follow. I haven't figured out an end to this thing, but that is, but yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Music for the show is provided by Bruno Loureiro. Follow us on Instagram at The Astrology of Terrible Things, all one word.